Jake Morrison had always been terrible at gift shopping. Standing in the cluttered antique shop on 5th Street, surrounded by dusty relics and mysterious artifacts, he felt that familiar panic creeping up his spine. His sister Emma's birthday was tomorrow, and he'd procrastinated until the very last minute again. "Can I help you find something?" asked the elderly shopkeeper, emerging from behind a towering shelf of ceramic figurines. Her accent was hard to place, somewhere between Eastern European and something else entirely. "I need a gift for my sister," Jake said, running his hand through his sandy brown hair. "She's into jewelry, weird vintage stuff. Something unusual." The woman's eyes lit up with an unsettling gleam. "Ah, unusual. Yes, I have just the thing." She disappeared into the back room, leaving Jake to wander among the shop's eclectic collection. That's when he saw it. The bracelet sat alone in a glass case, and Jake couldn't understand why it drew his attention so powerfully. It appeared to be made of some kind of dark metal, not quite black, but deep gray with an almost purple undertone. 7 stones were embedded along its length, each one shifting color in the afternoon light filtering through the shop's grimy windows. Sometimes they looked blue, sometimes green, occasionally flashing with what seemed like an inner fire. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The shopkeeper had returned, but instead of carrying another item, she was staring at the bracelet with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. "Very old. Very special." "How much?" Jake asked, already reaching for his wallet. Something about the piece felt right, like it was meant for Emma. "For you." She smiled, showing teeth that seemed slightly too sharp. 200. Jake winced. It was more than he'd planned to spend, but the bracelet was genuinely stunning. Emma would love it. "I'll take it." As the woman carefully removed the bracelet from its case, Jake noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, which struck him as an odd question from someone trying to make a sale. "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" She didn't answer, just wrapped the bracelet in black silk and placed it in a small wooden box. "Be very careful with this," she said, pressing the box into his hands. "And remember, once worn, some things cannot be undone." Jake laughed nervously. "It's just a bracelet." The woman's expression was grave. "Is it?" Walking home through downtown Portland, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every few blocks, he'd glance over his shoulder, but the streets were filled with the usual mix of tourists, office workers, and street musicians. Nothing out of the ordinary. Back in his apartment, Jake set the box on his kitchen counter and opened it to take another look. The bracelet was even more beautiful in the soft light of his living room. The stones seemed to pulse gently, like a slow heartbeat. Without really thinking about it, he lifted the bracelet from its silk wrapping. The moment his fingers made contact with the metal, the stones flared with brilliant light. Jake jerked his hand back, but it was too late. The bracelet had somehow fastened itself around his wrist. What the hell? He tugged at it, but there was no clasp, no opening mechanism. The metal felt warm against his skin, almost alive. Panic rising, he ran to the kitchen and tried soap, oil, even ice to make his hands smaller. Nothing worked. The bracelet remained firmly in place, as if it had fused with his skin. That's when the humming started. It was barely audible at first, like the distant sound of power lines. But it was coming from the bracelet, he was sure of it. The stones were pulsing in rhythm with the sound, growing brighter with each pulse. Jake's phone rang, making him jump. Emma's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, sis," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jake, I'm so excited about tomorrow. Did you get me something awesome?" He stared at the bracelet. "Yeah, you could say that. Listen, Emma, I might need to." The line went dead. Not just quiet, completely dead, as if his phone had suddenly lost all power. But the screen was still lit, still showing the call duration. A knock at his door made him freeze. Jake lived on the 4th floor of a building that required a key card to enter. The only people who could knock were neighbors, and he barely knew any of them. More importantly, he hadn't heard footsteps in the hallway. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Who is it?" Jake called out, moving toward the door but not opening it. Silence. He looked through the peephole and saw nothing but the empty hallway. But the feeling of being watched had intensified, making his skin crawl. The bracelet was humming louder now, and the stones were shifting from blue to deep purple. Jake stepped back from the door and immediately tripped over something that hadn't been there moments before. He hit the floor hard, his elbow smacking against the hardwood. When he looked up, a man was standing in his living room. Not standing, floating, about 2 inches off the ground. Jake's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The figure was tall, at least 6.5 feet, with long silver hair that seemed to move in a breeze that wasn't there. His skin had a slight blue tint, and his eyes were the color of liquid mercury. He wore what looked like armor made from the same dark metal as the bracelet, fitted perfectly to his lean, muscular frame. "You wear the Kethera," the being said, his voice carrying an accent that made the shopkeepers seem perfectly ordinary. This was not intended. Jake scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "I am HFY, of the 9th Legion of Kethmore." The alien, because there was no denying that's what he was, gestured to the bracelet. "You have bound yourself to me. I have what now?" Jake looked at the bracelet, which was now glowing so brightly, he could see its light through his sleeve. "Look, I don't know what's going on here, but this is all a mistake. I bought this for my sister." HFY tilted his head, studying Jake with an intensity that made him want to hide. "Your species is unknown to me. What world do you come from?" "Earth. This is Earth. Portland, Oregon, specifically." Jake was backing toward the kitchen, though he had no idea what he planned to do once he got there. "And you need to leave. Now." "I cannot leave." HFY's expression was almost sad. "The Kethera has chosen. We are bound until death." "Bound how?" Jake demanded. "It's just a bracelet. The Kethera is not mere jewelry. It is a sacred artifact of my people, used to mark the joining of warriors with their chosen mates. Once worn, it cannot be removed until—" HFY trailed off, his mercury eyes widening as he took in Jake's appearance more carefully. "You are male." "Yeah, so? The Kethera has only ever bonded females to males. Never." He stepped closer, close enough that Jake could see flecks of darker blue in his pale skin. "This is unprecedented." Jake's back hit the kitchen counter. "Look, Mr. HFY, right? This is all very interesting, but there's obviously been some kind of mistake. I'm not your mate. I'm not anyone's mate. I bought this thing at an antique shop." "An antique shop?" HFY's voice was flat. "On this world." "Yes, on this world. On Earth. The planet you're apparently not from." HFY was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from Jake's face to the bracelet and back again. "The Kethera was lost in battle 3 solar cycles ago. Our ship was attacked while transporting sacred artifacts to the temple world of Nethera. I assumed it had been destroyed. Well, it wasn't destroyed. It was in a weird antique shop being sold by a creepy old lady." Jake held up his wrist. "Now, can you please get it off me?" "I cannot." HFY's voice was gentle but firm. "The bond has been formed. The Kethera has accepted you as my mate." "I don't accept it," Jake practically shouted. "I don't even know you. And I'm definitely not ready to be anyone's intergalactic husband. The Kethera does not require your conscious acceptance. It reads the compatibility of souls." HFY moved closer again, and Jake caught a scent like ozone and winter air. "It has never been wrong." Jake slid along the counter, putting more distance between them. "Well, there's a first time for everything. Look, you seem like a nice, alien, warrior person, but I have a life here. A job, an apartment, a sister whose birthday is tomorrow. I can't just run off and be your space mate. You misunderstand. I am not asking you to leave your world." HFY's expression softened slightly. "The bonding can exist across any distance. But there are obligations." "What kind of obligations?" "The Kethera links us emotionally and physically. You will feel what I feel, know when I am in danger, sense my location across the stars. In return, I will be able to draw upon your strength in battle, and you upon mine in times of need. Jake stared at him. That sounds like something I should have been consulted about before it happened. Yes, HFY agreed. It should have been. The joining ritual typically involves months of courtship and preparation. This is highly irregular. Irregular is one word for it. Jake looked at the bracelet again. The stones had settled into a steady blue glow, and the humming had quieted to barely audible. So what happens now? Now? HFY seemed to consider the question carefully. Now we must learn to navigate this bond. I must return to my duties with the Legion, but I will be able to sense your well-being across the galaxy. And you? What about me? You will likely experience some changes. Enhanced strength, improved healing, extended lifespan. The bond works both ways. You receive some of my abilities, as I receive some of your humanity. Jake's head was spinning. Changes? What kind of changes? And what do you mean, extended lifespan? My people live for approximately 800 of your years. The bond will not grant you our full lifespan, but it will likely extend yours significantly. I'm going to live for 800 years? Perhaps half that. It is difficult to predict with a species we have never encountered before. Jake slumped against the counter. This was insane. This morning his biggest worry had been finding a birthday present. Now he was apparently cosmically married to an alien warrior and might live for 4 centuries. This is a lot to process, he said weakly. Yes. HFY's voice was surprisingly kind. I understand this is not what you intended when you put on the Kethera. In my culture, both parties enter the bonding willingly, with full knowledge of what it entails. What would happen if one of you died? Jake asked, not sure he wanted to know the answer. HFY's expression darkened. The survivor would feel the death as if it were their own. Many do not survive the severing of such a deep bond. Great, so we're stuck together whether we like it or not. I am afraid so. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between them. Jake studied the alien warrior, taking in details he'd missed in his initial panic. HFY was undeniably handsome, in an otherworldly way. His features were sharp and angular but not harsh. There was intelligence in those mercury eyes, and something else, loneliness, maybe. Can I ask you something? Jake said finally. Of course. Were you looking for a mate? I mean, when this thing went missing, were you planning to use it? HFY was quiet for so long that Jake wondered if he'd offended him somehow. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. No. The Kethera belonged to my battle partner, Kethran. She was to be bonded to a warrior from the 5th Legion when we returned from our mission. She died defending the artifact ship. I'm sorry, Jake said, and meant it. As am I. She would have found this situation amusing, I think. Kethran always said the universe had a sense of humor. Another silence fell, but this one felt less tense. Jake found himself studying HFY's face, wondering what he was thinking. So what happens day to day? Jake asked. I mean, you said you have duties with your Legion. Are you going to just disappear back into space? For now, yes, but the bond means I will return. The pull will become too strong to ignore if we are separated for too long. How long is too long? For a new bond? Perhaps a few of your weeks. Jake's eyes widened. You're going to show up at my apartment every few weeks? Or you will feel compelled to find me. HFY's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. The bond works both ways, Jake Morrison. How do you know my name? The Kethera shares knowledge between bonded pairs. I know your name, your age, your occupation. I know you have a sister named Emma who worries about you, and that you prefer coffee to tea. That's invasive. Yes, I also know that you are kind, loyal, and more brave than you give yourself credit for. You faced an unknown being in your home with no weapons and no backup. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. I was terrified. Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. There was something in HFY's voice, a warmth that made Jake's chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. The bracelet pulsed gently, as if responding to his emotional state. I should go. Zexai said suddenly. This has been overwhelming for you. The bond will help you adjust gradually. Wait. Jake stepped forward without thinking. Will I know you're okay? Out there in space doing warrior things. Yes, just as I will know if you are in danger. Zexai's gaze lingered on Jake's face. The shopkeeper who sold you the Keth era. Did she seem familiar with its properties? Jake thought back to the strange woman and her cryptic warnings. Maybe. She said some weird things about it being special, and something about things that can't be undone once worn. She may not have been entirely human. Some species can sense the power in sacred artifacts. She might have known what would happen when you put it on. You think she did this on purpose? Perhaps. Or perhaps the universe simply decided it was time for the Keth era to find a new purpose. Zexai moved toward the living room, and Jake followed. I must report to my commanders. They will want to know that the artifact has been found, though I will not mention the complications immediately. What happens when you do tell them? I am not certain. This situation is unprecedented. There may be political ramifications. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. What kind of political ramifications? The Keth era is not just a bonding artifact. It is a symbol of alliance between warrior houses. Your bonding to it may be seen as significant by the High Council. Significant how? Zexai hesitated. Earth is not known to the Galactic Council. Your world exists in what we consider wild space, unexplored and unclaimed. But if you are bonded to a warrior of Kethmore, you're saying I might have accidentally made Earth politically important to a bunch of aliens? It is possible. Jake sat down heavily on his couch. This just keeps getting better. I will do everything in my power to protect both you and your world, Zexai said with quiet intensity. The bond makes your well-being as important to me as my own life. But you barely know me. The Keth era does not bond strangers. It sees something in the compatibility of souls that conscious minds might miss. Zexai paused at Jake's front window, looking out at the city lights. I felt the rightness of it the moment I saw you wearing it. What do you mean? I have been alone for a very long time, Jake Morrison. I had accepted that I would remain so. But when I traced the Keth era's signal to this place, when I saw you, he turned back to face Jake. I felt something I had not felt in decades. Hope. Jake's throat tightened. There was such loneliness in those mercury eyes, such quiet pain. The bracelet pulsed again, warmer this time, and Jake realized he could feel something. An echo of emotion that wasn't quite his own. I can feel it, he said suddenly. What you're feeling. Just a little bit. Yes, that is the bond forming. Zexai's voice was soft. In time, the connection will deepen. Is that scary for you? Having someone feel your emotions. Terrifying, Zexai admitted, but also liberating. I have carried my burdens alone for so long. Jake stood and moved closer, drawn by an impulse he didn't fully understand. What kind of burdens? The weight of command, the loss of my battle partner and dear friend, the knowledge that my people are fighting a war that may not be winnable. Zexai's gaze met Jake's. And you? What burdens do you carry, my unexpected mate? The casual use of the word, mate, should have freaked Jake out, but instead it sent a warm pulse through his chest. Nothing as dramatic as yours, just ordinary human stuff. Feeling like I'm not quite living up to my potential. Worrying about my sister. Being afraid I'll end up alone. You will not be alone, Zexai said with quiet certainty. Not anymore. They stood there looking at each other, and Jake felt the strangest sense of recognition, as if he'd been waiting his whole life to meet this person without knowing it. I really do have to go, Zexai said finally, but I will return. When? Soon. The pull to be near you is already stronger than I expected. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. Zexai moved toward the door, then paused. Jake? The gift you intended for your sister. Perhaps you should find something else. The Keth era has chosen its bearer. Yeah, I figured that out. Jake touched the bracelet through his sleeve. Any suggestions for what to tell Emma about why I'm suddenly wearing jewelry? Tell her it was a gift from someone special. Is that what you are? Someone special? Zexai's smile was soft and devastating. I hope to be. And then he was gone. Not through the door but simply gone, as if he'd never been there at all. Jake stood alone in his apartment, staring at the space where the alien warrior had been. His phone rang again. Emma's number. Jake? We got cut off before. Is everything okay? Yeah, Jake said, surprised to find that he meant it. Everything's different. But okay. Different how? Jake looked at the bracelet, its stones now glowing a gentle, steady blue. He could feel something at the edge of his consciousness, a presence that was warm and protective and utterly alien. Zexai was still close, somewhere in the city, though Jake had no idea how he knew that. I'll tell you tomorrow, he said. At your birthday dinner. Ooh, mysterious. I like it. Did you get me something good? Jake smiled, thinking of the impossibly tall, silver-haired warrior who would apparently be part of his life from now on, whether either of them had planned for it or not. I got us both something unexpected, he said. But I think you're going to love the story. After Emma hung up, Jake sat on his couch and held up his wrist, watching the stones pulse gently in the lamplight. Somewhere out there among the stars, Zexai was dealing with the consequences of their accidental bonding. And somehow, despite the complete insanity of the situation, Jake found himself looking forward to seeing him again. The bracelet pulsed once more, and Jake could swear he felt an echo of that sentiment coming back to him across whatever impossible distance separated them. Well, he said aloud to his empty apartment, this is going to be interesting. Outside his window, a shooting star streaked across the Portland sky. Jake made a wish on it, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was wishing for anymore. His old life had ended the moment he'd put on the Kethera, but maybe, just maybe, his new life might be something worth staying alive for 400 years to see. The bracelet hummed softly against his wrist, like a contented cat, and Jake smiled despite everything. Emma was right, he did love a good story, and this one was just getting started. 3 days later, Jake was beginning to understand what Zexai had meant about changes. It started small. He woke up without his usual morning grogginess, felt more energetic throughout the day, and noticed that a cut on his hand from opening a particularly stubborn package had healed overnight. But by the third day, the changes were impossible to ignore. Jake, what the hell? Emma stared at him across the table at their favorite brunch spot. Did you start working out? You look different. Jake glanced down at himself. His shoulders did seem broader somehow, and his usually pale skin had taken on a subtle glow that made him look like he'd been getting regular sun despite spending most of his time indoors. I've been trying some new things, he said vaguely, which was technically true. New things like what? You look like you've gained 20 pounds of muscle in 3 days. Emma leaned forward, studying his face. And your eyes are brighter. Are you on some kind of supplements? Something like that. Jake touched the bracelet through his sleeve. He'd taken to wearing long sleeves constantly to hide the glow, which had intensified over the past few days. How's the bracelet working out, by the way? Emma had been thrilled with the replacement gift he'd hastily purchased, a vintage silver piece he'd found at another antique shop, but she kept giving him curious looks whenever she noticed him absently rubbing his wrist. It's beautiful, thank you. But Jake, seriously, what's going on with you? You seem, I don't know, different. Happier, maybe? Before Jake could answer, every cell phone in the restaurant started buzzing simultaneously. Confused murmurs rose from the other diners as people checked their devices. Emma pulled out her phone and her face went pale. Jake, look at this. The emergency alert was simple and terrifying. Unidentified aircraft spotted over Portland. Residents advised to remain indoors. This is not a drill. Jake's blood ran cold. The bracelet suddenly flared so hot against his wrist that he gasped, and he felt a sharp spike of alarm that definitely wasn't his own emotion. We need to go, he said, standing abruptly. Go where? The alert says to stay inside. Trust me. Jake threw money on the table and grabbed Emma's hand. We need to get out of here. Now. They made it 3 blocks before the sky lit up. The ship, and there was no denying that's what it was, hung directly over downtown Portland like a dark metal cloud. It was roughly triangular, maybe the size of a city block, with surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. As Jake watched in horrified fascination, smaller craft began detaching from the main vessel. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. "Jake, that's a UFO, yeah?" Jake's mind was racing. The bracelet was practically vibrating now, and he could feel Zexai's presence much more strongly than before. He was close, very close, and he was in danger. The smaller ships were descending rapidly, their trajectory aimed directly at the city center. People were screaming now, running in all directions. Car alarms wailed as vehicles collided in the panic. "Emma, I need you to get to your apartment and stay there," Jake said, scanning the sky for any sign of Zexai. "What? No, I'm not leaving you. You have to. Please." Jake grabbed her shoulders, looking directly into her eyes. "I can't explain everything right now, but I need to know you're safe." "Jake, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. But please just go home and lock the door. Don't come out until this is over." Emma stared at him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." She kissed his cheek and ran toward her car. Jake watched until she was safely away, then turned his attention back to the chaos overhead. One of the smaller ships was different from the others. Where the rest were descending in formation, this one was spinning erratically, trailing smoke. As Jake watched, it broke away from the group and plummeted toward the street. Without thinking, Jake ran toward the crash site. The ship, if it could be called that, had carved a smoking furrow through the asphalt and come to rest against the side of a building. It was small, maybe the size of a car, and shaped like a teardrop. As Jake approached, a section of its hull split open with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Zexai tumbled out, his silver hair singed and his armor cracked in several places. He was bleeding. The fluid was darker than human blood, almost purple, and one arm hung at an odd angle. "Zexai!" Jake rushed to his side, catching him as he stumbled. "Jake!" Zexai's mercury eyes were glazed with pain. "You should not be here. It is not safe." "What's happening? Who are these people?" "Hunters. They tracked the Cathera's signal." Zexai leaned heavily against Jake, and Jake was surprised by how easily he supported the alien's weight. "They know about the bond. What do they want?" "You." Zexai's grip on Jake's arm tightened. "The bonding of the Cathera to an unknown species. It has created interest. They wish to study you, to understand how the artifact functions with human physiology." Jake felt ice in his veins. "Study me how?" "Vivisection, most likely." "That's not happening." The words came out with more force than Jake had intended, and he felt a surge of protective fury that seemed to strengthen his body. "Can you fight?" "My arm is broken, and I have internal injuries." Zexai managed a weak smile. "But yes, I can fight." "Good, because I think we're about to have company." 3 figures were approaching from the crash site of another ship. They moved with predatory grace, and Jake could see that while they were humanoid, they definitely weren't human. Their skin was gray and mottled, their faces elongated, and their eyes were solid black. They carried weapons that looked like they'd been grown rather than manufactured. "Kethai of the 9th Legion," one of them called out in accented English. "You will surrender the bonded human for examination." "I will surrender nothing to the Veltar," Zexai replied, managing to straighten despite his injuries. "You have no authority here." "We have the authority of science," the lead hunter said. "The bonding of a Cathera to an alien species must be studied. The implications are too significant to ignore." "The implications are that you need to back off," Jake said, stepping protectively in front of Zexai. He was surprised by how steady his voice sounded. The hunter's black eyes fixed on him with disturbing intensity. Fascinating. The human shows protective instincts toward its bonded mate despite knowing him for mere days. The psychological effects are stronger than anticipated. "Stop talking about me like I'm not here." "You are not fully here," another hunter said. The Keth era has begun changing you at the cellular level. Soon you will be neither fully human nor fully Kethmore. A hybrid. An abomination. Jake felt Zexhai tense beside him. The bond does not create abominations, the warrior said coldly. It creates unity. Unity between compatible species, yes. But this, the lead hunter gestured dismissively. This is an accident that must be corrected. The only thing that needs correcting is your presence on this world, Jake said. The bracelet was burning against his wrist now, and he could feel power flowing through him. Zexhai's strength, somehow shared through their bond. Leave. Now. The hunters exchanged glances, communicating in a series of clicks and hisses that hurt Jake's ears. We had hoped to take you peacefully, the leader said finally. But if you resist. The weapon in his hand began to glow with sickly green light. Jake had never been in a real fight in his life. He'd taken exactly one self-defense class in college and remembered none of it. But as the hunter raised his weapon, something else took over. Instincts that weren't entirely his own, reflexes enhanced by the bond. He moved faster than he'd ever moved before, closing the distance between himself and the lead hunter in a heartbeat. His hand closed around the alien's wrist, and Jake was amazed by his own strength as he twisted until he heard bones crack. The weapon fell from nerveless fingers. The second hunter was already firing, but Zexhai was there despite his injuries, deflecting the energy blast with a piece of debris that he wielded like a shield. The third hunter tried to flank them, but Jake was already moving, the world seeming to slow around him as he processed threats and possibilities at superhuman speed. It was over in less than a minute. 3 Veltar hunters lay unconscious in the street, and Jake stood over them breathing hard, his hands shaking with adrenaline. That was, he started to say, then stopped. Did I just do that? We did that, Zexhai corrected gently. The bond allows us to share more than emotions. In times of extreme danger, we can share physical capabilities as well. Jake looked at his hands. They looked normal, but he could feel strength thrumming through them that definitely hadn't been there an hour ago. Is this permanent? Some of it, yes. The Keth era has been changing your body since the moment you put it on. You are becoming something new, not human, not Kethmore, but something uniquely yours. More ships were landing throughout the city. Jake could hear explosions in the distance, screams, the wail of sirens. But he also heard something else. A low thrumming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. That's not them, Zexhai said, looking up at the sky with something like relief. That's my people. The massive ship hovering over downtown Portland was no longer alone. 3 smaller but still impressive vessels had appeared seemingly from nowhere, their hulls gleaming silver in the afternoon sun. They moved with graceful precision, surrounding the Veltar vessel. The 9th Legion, Zexhai explained. They received my distress signal. Will they help us? They will protect you, Zexhai said with certainty. The Keth era makes you one of us now, whether the High Council approves or not. A new sound filled the air, not mechanical but organic. A voice speaking in a language that sounded like music and thunder combined. Even though Jake didn't understand the words, their meaning was clear. Surrender or be destroyed. The Veltar ship began to withdraw, pulling its smaller vessels back like a retreating swarm. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving only scorch marks and debris to prove they'd ever been there. One of the Kethmore ships landed in the street near Jake and Zexhai, its hull opening to reveal a boarding ramp. A figure emerged, tall and silver-haired like Zexhai, but female, with intricate tattoos covering her arms and the left side of her face. Zexhai, you fool, she called out in accented English. Do you have any idea what you've done? Commander Velshan. Zexhai inclined his head respectfully. I have found the lost Keth era. You have bonded the lost Keth era to an alien species and started a diplomatic incident, she replied curtly. But her expression softened as she took in his injuries. Are you badly hurt? Nothing that will not heal. But the human, Jake, he needs protection. The Veltar will return. Velshan's gaze moved to Jake, studying him with unconcealed curiosity. So you are the one who has caused such upheaval. You look surprisingly ordinary. Thanks, Jake said dryly. I think the bond has accepted him, Zexai said. The Keth era chose him specifically. That must mean something. It means the High Council will want to examine this situation very carefully. Velshan stepped closer to Jake, close enough that he could see the tattoos on her face were actually tiny, intricate script. But first, we must get both of you to safety. The Veltar are not the only ones who will be interested in this development. What do you mean? Word of your bonding has already reached the council. They are intrigued. Some view it as an opportunity. Others see it as a threat to our traditions. She gestured toward her ship. Either way, you cannot remain on this world unprotected. Jake felt his heart sink. You want me to leave Earth? I want you to live, Velshan said bluntly. And right now, that means coming with us until we can determine how best to handle this situation. I can't just leave. I have a life here. A job, a sister. A sister who is currently hiding in her apartment wondering if the world is ending, Zexai said gently. Jake, staying here puts not only you at risk, but everyone you care about. The Veltar will use them against you. Jake closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. When he opened them again, Velshan was watching him with something like sympathy. It need not be permanent, she said. But until we can establish protections for your world and your people, you must come with us. Jake looked around at the damaged street, the confused and frightened faces of people emerging from buildings, the signs of the battle that had just been fought over his head. 3 days ago, his biggest worry had been finding a birthday present. Now he was apparently at the center of an interstellar diplomatic crisis. The bracelet pulsed against his wrist, warm and reassuring. Through the bond, he could feel Zexai's steady presence, his quiet strength, his absolute determination to protect Jake no matter the cost. If I go with you, Jake said slowly, what happens to Earth? We will establish it as a protected world under Kethmore authority, Velshan replied. No one will be allowed to interfere with your people without our permission. And if I don't go, then the Veltar will return with a larger force, and they will take you regardless. But not before they destroy everything and everyone you care about to ensure your cooperation. Jake felt Zexai's hand on his shoulder, strong and warm even through his injuries. The choice is yours, the warrior said quietly. But whatever you decide, I will stand with you. Jake looked up at the alien ships hovering overhead, then at the city he'd called home his entire life. Somewhere out there, Emma was waiting for word that he was safe. His boss was probably wondering why he hadn't shown up for work. His life was here, but his future was standing beside him, silver-haired and wounded and looking at him like he was the most important thing in the universe. How long? Jake asked. Until we can ensure your safety? Perhaps a few months. Maybe longer. Velshan's expression was apologetic. I cannot give you certainties. This situation is unprecedented. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the alien strength flowing through his enhanced body, the bond humming with possibility and promise. Okay, he said. I'll go, but I need to call my sister first. She deserves to know I'm alive. Velshan nodded. Make it brief, and do not tell her where you are going. For her own protection. As Jake pulled out his phone, he realized that his old life had ended the moment he'd put on the Keth era. But maybe, just maybe, his new life would be worth the sacrifice. As Jake pulled out his phone, he realized that his old life had ended the moment he'd put on the Keth era. But maybe, just maybe, his new life would be worth the sacrifice. The bracelet pulsed once, warm with approval, and Jake smiled despite everything. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. 6 months later, Jake stood at the observation deck of the Kethmore flagship, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport as they approached. The planet looked exactly the same as when he'd left, blue and green and beautiful, but he knew he was seeing it with different eyes now. Nervous. Zexai's voice was warm with affection as he joined Jake at the window. Terrified, Jake admitted, leaning into his mate's side. The word no longer felt strange. Over the past 6 months, somewhere between learning to pilot a starfighter and attending diplomatic meetings with species he couldn't pronounce the names of, Zexhai had become the most important person in his universe. "Your sister will understand," Zexhai said, wrapping an arm around Jake's waist. "From what you have told me of her, she is remarkably adaptable." Jake laughed. "That's one way to put it. I'm more worried about explaining the whole I'm now technically an alien prince thing." It had been Velshan who'd broken that particular bit of news to him 3 months ago. Apparently, bonding with a high-ranking Kethmore warrior came with certain political implications. The High Council had eventually decided that rather than view Jake's accidental bonding as a problem, they would treat it as an opportunity, the first step toward bringing Earth into the Galactic Alliance as a protected member world. "You are not a prince," Zexhai corrected with a smile. "You are a Kethera-bonded mate to a Legion commander. The political weight is similar, but the title is different. Right? Because that makes it so much better." Jake turned away from the viewport to face his mate fully. The past 6 months had been good to Zexhai. The loneliness that had shadowed his mercury eyes was gone, replaced by warmth and contentment. "Are you sure about this? Coming to Earth, your people need you." "My people need me happy and functional," Zexhai replied. "And I am neither when separated from you for too long. Besides," he gestured toward the viewport, "Earth is now under Kethmore protection. Someone needs to establish a permanent embassy here. And you volunteered." "I insisted." Zexhai's hand found the Kethera on Jake's wrist, tracing the stones that now glowed with steady silver light instead of blue. The change had happened gradually as their bond deepened, and according to the Council's researchers, it indicated a perfect compatibility that occurred maybe once in 1,000 bondings. "This world gave me the greatest gift of my life. It seems only fitting that I should help protect it." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I love you," he said, still marveling at how easily the words came now. "And I love you, my impossible mate." Zexhai kissed him softly, then pulled back with a grin. "Now, shall we go collect your sister? I believe you promised to introduce her to your boyfriend from out of town." Jake groaned. "I'm never going to hear the end of this." An hour later, Jake stood outside Emma's apartment building, fidgeting with his sleeve. He'd learned to control the Kethera's glow, but he was still nervous about Emma's reaction to everything. 6 months was a long time to be gone with only sporadic phone calls and carefully worded emails for contact. "Relax," Zexhai murmured, squeezing his hand. The alien warrior looked remarkably normal in human clothes, though Jake suspected anyone who looked closely would notice the otherworldly grace in his movements and the slightly too perfect symmetry of his features. "Easy for you to say. You've never had to explain intergalactic politics to a social worker." Before Zexhai could respond, the building's front door burst open and Emma practically launched herself at Jake. "Oh my God, you're back." She hugged him fiercely, and Jake was careful to control his enhanced strength as he hugged her back. "I missed you so much. Your emails were terrible, by the way. Consulting work overseas tells me absolutely nothing." "I missed you too," Jake said, and meant it. "Emma, there's someone I want you to meet." Emma stepped back and turned to Zexhai, who had been waiting patiently with an amused expression. Jake watched his sister's face cycle through surprise, appreciation, and then narrow-eyed suspicion. "You're the boyfriend," she said. "I am Zexhai," he replied with a slight bow that managed to be formal without being ridiculous. "Jake has told me much about you." "Zexhai," Emma repeated slowly. "That's unusual." "I am from very far away," Zexhai said with perfect honesty. Emma looked between them, taking in their joined hands and the obvious comfort they had with each other. "How far away?" Jake and Zexhai exchanged a look. They'd agreed to tell Emma the truth. She deserved that much. But Jake was still nervous about her reaction. "Emma," Jake said carefully, "remember when Portland was attacked by those UFOs 6 months ago?" "Yeah, of course. It was all over the news for weeks, though the government keeps insisting it was some kind of experimental aircraft." She trailed off, her eyes widening. "Jake, no, I'm afraid so." Emma stared at Zexhai with new understanding. You're an alien. I prefer Keth more, Zexhai said mildly. But yes. And you're dating my brother. I am bonded to your brother. The relationship is somewhat more serious than dating. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, is that why Jake looks like he's been hitting the gym with Captain America for 6 months? Jake laughed despite his nerves. Something like that. And the emails about consulting work overseas? I was kind of in space, Jake admitted, learning about galactic politics and trying not to start any interstellar incidents. Emma rubbed her temples. I need coffee and alcohol, but mostly coffee. She looked up at them. Are you both staying? Please tell me you're staying. We are, Zexhai said gently. I have been assigned as the Kethmore ambassador to Earth. We will be establishing an embassy here in Portland. An embassy. Emma's voice was faint. My brother is dating an alien ambassador. Bonded to, Jake corrected. And technically I'm now some kind of diplomat myself. Of course you are. Emma shook her head, but she was smiling. You know what? I'm not even surprised. You always were weird about commitment, so of course when you finally settle down it's with someone from another planet. Zexhai raised an eyebrow. Is that approval? That's resignation, Emma said. But also approval. Jake looks happier than I've ever seen him, and if you hurt him, I know where to buy alien fighting weapons now, thanks to the last 6 months of government preparation for future contact scenarios. I would expect nothing less from Jake's family, Zexhai replied solemnly. Emma studied him for another moment, then nodded. Okay, I like you, but I have about 1,000,000 questions. I will answer what I can, Zexhai promised. Good. Starting with, do you eat normal food? Or do I need to find some kind of alien takeout for dinner? Jake burst out laughing. I love you, Emma. I love you too, you cosmic disaster. She linked her arms through both of theirs. Come on, let's go get coffee and you can tell me everything. And I mean everything. I want to know about the spaceships and the aliens and why the government keeps calling to ask if I've heard from you. As they walked down the street together, Jake felt the Keth-era pulse with contentment against his wrist. 6 months ago, he'd thought his life was ordinary, predictable, maybe even a little boring. Now he was bonded to an alien warrior, Earth was part of a galactic alliance, and he had responsibilities he'd never imagined. But he also had love, adventure, and the certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Zexhai would face them together. The bracelet had chosen well, binding 2 lonely souls across the vastness of space. Sometimes the universe really did have a sense of humor. And sometimes, Jake reflected as Zexhai's hand tightened around his, its jokes turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. So, Emma said conversationally as they found a table at their old favorite coffee shop. When's the wedding? Because if we're doing this, we're doing it right, and I have opinions about the catering. Jake groaned, but he was smiling. Some things at least never changed.